Matthew chapter 24, from verse 36 on through chapter 25, he is going to be talking about the end of time. That is the transition point in verse 36. He says, "But of that day and hour no one knows, not even the angels of heaven, nor the Son, but the Father alone. For the coming of the Son of Man will be just like the days of Noah. For as in the days before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying, and given in marriage, until the day that Noah entered the ark. And they did not understand until the flood came and took them all away. So will be the coming of the Son of Man. There will be 2 men in the field, one will be taken and one will be left. 2 women will be grinding at the mill, one will be taken and the other left." Verse 42, "Therefore be on alert, for you do not know which day your Lord is coming. But be sure of this, that if the head of the house had known at what time the night the thief was coming, he would have been on alert and would not have allowed his house to be broken into. For this reason you also must be ready, for the Son of Man is coming at an hour when you do not think." The emphasis there is always be ready, always prepared. He's going to come when you don't think. It's going to be unexpected. He uses the illustration of the flood. And everything was going as normal until the flood came. He said that's the way the Son of Man will be when He comes. Verse 40 and 41, He talks about separation. There's going to be a separation here. People will be separated. Life is going to go on as normal. And there's going to be a separation of humanity. He'll go into more detail about that in chapter 25, when he talks about the great day of judgment. He says, be on alert, verse 42, or be ready, some translations might say. You don't know when it's going to happen. You know, there have been religious groups down throughout the ages who have tried to predict the coming of the Lord. In the 990s, it was predicted that Christ would come in the year 1000. They thought for sure all the events that were taking place in the 990s was leading up to the coming of the Lord. They said Christ was supposed to reign for 1,000 years. Then when they get to the year 1000, they were just for sure, they just knew Christ was coming. And they pointed all of the events that were happening around them to say, look, Christ is coming. Of course, it's been 2,000 or 1,000 years since then, and He hasn't. And the same thing in the 1900s. Even earlier than that, in the 1800s, there were people who were setting dates for Christ to return. Setting dates. And the Seventh-day Adventist founder, he set dates for the coming of Christ. The founder of the Jehovah's Witness, he set all kind of dates throughout the early or the late 1800s and early 1900s. They kept saying, He's going to come in this year, He's going to come in this year, and He's going to come in. And they keep failing. And if people would just understand that no one knows, Christ said that He did not know, not even the angels in heaven, but the Father alone did not know when He was coming. So it's ridiculous to try to pinpoint any time period in which He has come. You just be ready. You know, when I was living in Garland, we lived next door to Jennifer's parents. And one night, Jennifer's dad had his tool stolen from the back of his pickup. His toolbox, from his toolbox. It was the thief in the night. There was no indication, no sign. The thief didn't call ahead and say he was going to do this. He didn't give any sign. He just did it. And that's the way it's going to be. Christ saying that's how it is when I return. This reason, He says in verse 44, be ready, for the Son of Man is coming at an hour that you do not think. He's coming like a thief in the night. Let's look at a few passages that bear that out. 1 Thessalonians 5, verses 1 through 4. 1 and 2 Thessalonians is dealing with the coming of Christ and the resurrection of the dead. And he talks about the resurrection of the dead in 1 Thessalonians 4. But chapter 5, verses 1 through 4, he makes it very clear. He says, but concerning the times and the seasons, brethren, you have no need that I should write to you, for you yourselves know perfectly that the day of the Lord comes as a thief in the night. For when they say peace and safety, sudden destruction comes upon them as labor pains upon a pregnant woman, and they shall not escape. But you, brethren, are not in darkness so that that day should overtake you as a thief. You don't know when it's going to come, but if you're living the way you should, it's not going to overtake you as a thief. If you're always expecting Him to come, you're always ready if you're living right. So that is the point that's being conveyed here. You live right all the time and you're always ready. Doesn't matter when He comes. You're always ready. 2 Peter chapter 3 verses 10 through 13. 2 Peter 3 verses 10 through 13. The Apostle Peter talks about those who are mockers, scoffers, who say, where is this coming? Everything is continued the same as is from the creation. He says they're ignorant of the fact that the world was destroyed by a flood. He said the current world that now exists is going to be destroyed by fire. 2 Peter 3 verses 10 through 13. The day of the Lord will come as a thief in the night, in which the heavens will pass away with a great noise, and the elements will melt with fervent heat. Both the earth and the works that are in it will be burned up. Therefore, verse 11, since all these things will be dissolved, what manner of persons ought you to be in holy conduct and godliness? If you know that one day Christ is going to come, He's going to come like a thief in the night, then how should you behave with all holy conduct and godliness? You should be living right, and that's not going to be a problem for you. Verse 12, looking for and hastening the coming of the day of the Lord, because of which the heavens will be dissolved, being on fire, and the elements will melt with fervent heat. Nevertheless, according to His promise, we look for a new heavens and a new earth in which righteousness dwells. We're looking forward to heaven. And if you're living right and you're walking with the Lord, then it's no problem whenever He returns. We're not going to be around when this earth is destroyed anyway. It's going to come to an end. It's going to be destroyed with fervent heat. Revelation 16 and verse 15. Behold, I am coming as a thief. As a thief. Blessed is he who watches and keeps his garments, lest he walk naked and I see his shame. So you keep yourself ready. If you're always on call, you ever work for a job where they keep you on call? You got to be ready whenever they call. Morning, noon, or night, you got the phone, you got the pager. They want to get a hold of you. It could be 3 in the morning, it could be 2 in the afternoon. You're always on call. Well, as Christians, we're always on call. He could come today, He may not come for another 1,000 years. He is going to come like a thief in the night. But we should be looking forward to it with anticipation. If you're living right, you're looking forward to it. If you're not living as you should, the thought of Christ returning should scare you to death. I tell you, that's one thing that motivated me to become a Christian. I was baptized on a Tuesday night because I didn't want to wait till a Wednesday night service. I knew there may not be a Wednesday night service. And I said, I want to do it now. And they made it available for me to do it, and I'm glad they did. They accommodated me because I wanted to obey, because I knew these passages. I didn't know a whole lot of Bible back then, but I knew that Christ could return. I could die. So I wanted to be baptized immediately, and that's what I tell people. If I study with them, I give them my number, and if they're thinking about obeying the gospel, you call me anytime, day or night. We got water. We can baptize you into Christ. There's no sense in delay. We never know. We should be looking forward to it as Christians. Titus chapter 2 verses 11 through 14. For the grace of God that brings salvation has appeared to all men, teaching us that denying ungodliness and worldly lust, we should live soberly, righteously, and godly in the present age, looking for that blessed hope and glorious appearing of our great God and Savior Jesus Christ, who gave Himself for us, that He might redeem us from every lawless deed and purify for Himself His own special people, that's the church, zealous for good works. We should be looking forward to it. Yes?
Some there is a belief that since Christ says we are the salt of the earth, which is a preservative, that as long as there's good people that are seeking the truth, that He will postpone His coming until there is no chance of anyone else.
Right.
And we're facing that today. Our society is so wicked.
Exactly. In fact, what you're saying there is in 2 Peter chapter 3, the Lord is not slack concerning His promise, but is long-suffering towards us, not willing that any should perish, but that all should come to repentance. And that's exactly going along with what you said. The reason why Christ hasn't returned to this very moment, because there's still hope for some. And I believe that's exactly what you're saying. God only knows when there's no more hope. And when that time is, whenever it is, then that'll be the end. And I don't believe it's correct for us to say that Christ is coming soon. There's a song that is sung sometimes by brethren, Jesus is coming soon, and I can't say that. I say Jesus is coming. It might be soon, it might be another 2,000 years. Who knows? If He's going to come like a thief in the night, we don't know. I can't say a thief is going to break into my house soon. Why do I know that? We just say Jesus is coming. It could be today, and we should just live as though each day could be the last. And it could be that because of death, and it could be that because of Christ's return. And if you're walking in the light and walking with the Lord, then there's no need to fear. In fact, you're looking forward to it. You're looking forward to it. Back to Matthew chapter 24, verse 45. He's going to give some parables here concerning being prepared. Being prepared and being ready when the Lord returns. Verse 45. Who then is the faithful and sensible, wise slave, whom his master put in charge of his household to give them their food at the proper time? Blessed is that slave whom the master finds doing when he comes. So doing. In other words, if you're doing the things of the Lord, you're blessed. You're blessed. So, be busy about the work of the Lord. You're always ready. No matter when the master comes. Verse 47, truly I say to you, that he will put him in charge of all of his possessions. But if the evil slave says in his heart, my master is not coming for a long time. See, he can't say that. No more than a person can say the Lord's coming soon. He's not coming. He's delaying His coming. He's not coming for a while. Verse 49. He begins to beat his fellow slaves and eat and to drink with the drunkards. And verse 50. The master of the slave will come on a day when he does not expect him, and at an hour which he does not know, and will cut him in pieces and assign him a place with the hypocrites, in the place where there is weeping and gnashing of teeth. What's verse 51 talking about? But in what particular place is he talking about at the end of time? Hell. He's talking about hell there. So he's talking about the end of time. And he's talking about here when this slave of his is not doing the master's will. Notice the description of hell here. He is going to be cut in pieces. Verse 51. Some translations might be severely scourged. Of course, if you study the concept of being scourged, you know the torture that's involved in that. And assign him a place with the hypocrites, in the place where there is weeping and gnashing of teeth. He's talking about Gehenna, hell, punishment. Notice how terrible a description of place that is. It's a place where you're cut in pieces, and there's so much anguish and pain that there's weeping and gnashing of teeth, and it never ends. We're going to learn in chapter 25, it's everlasting punishment. That's how serious it is. That's how serious it is. So the point of the parable in verses 45 through 51 is be busy doing the master's will, and you will be blessed, you will be rewarded, you will have salvation, and the one who does not will be lost. Chapter 25. Chapter 25, he's going to give the parable of the 10 virgins here. He says the kingdom of heaven will be compared to 10 virgins who took their lamps and went out and met the bridegroom. 5 of them were foolish and 5 of them were wise, or prudent. For when the foolish took their lamps, they took no oil with them, verse 4, but the prudent or the wise took oil in flasks along with their lamps. Now while the bridegroom was delayed, they all got drowsy and began to sleep. But at midnight there was a shout, Behold, the bridegroom, come out to meet him. Then all those virgins rose and trimmed their lamps. Verse 8, the foolish said to the prudent or the wise, Give us some of your oil, for our lamps are going out. But the prudent answered and said, No, there will not be enough for us and to give to you. Go instead to the dealers and buy some for yourselves. Verse 10. And while they were going away and making purchase, the bridegroom came, and those who were ready went with him to the wedding feast, and the door was shut. The door was shut. Later the other virgins came also, saying, Lord, Lord, open to us. Doesn't that sound like Matthew chapter 7? Lord, Lord. Not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven. Matthew 7:21. But he who does the will of my Father in heaven. But he answered and said, Truly I say to you, I do not know you. Again, that sounds like Matthew 7. Depart from me, you workers of lawlessness. I don't know you. Be on alert, verse 13, then, for you do not know the day nor the hour. Be on alert. Be ready. You're always on call. Be a faithful Christian. Now what we have to understand in verses 1 through 13 is the wedding feast of the ancient people were a big deal. We can have a wedding within about 30 minutes and we're done, we're out of there. But in those cultures, it lasted about a week. It was a big deal of feasting. And you had these virgins, and notice, by the way, just a side point, the Bible teaches that you remain a virgin until you're married. That's what the Bible teaching is concerning virginity. And he says here concerning this, that they were going to meet the bridegroom. The bridegroom would come and they, in this wedding procession, and they would come out with their lamps. They would be ready to meet the the bridegroom as he comes to this situation here. The wise ones were ready. They had enough oil. They were prepared. The foolish ones were not. Verse 5, now the bridegroom was delaying. They all got drowsy and began to sleep. Indicates almost like spiritual laziness. Get drowsy. Get comfortable. Not alert anymore. Go to sleep. At midnight there was a shout. Behold, the bridegroom come out to meet him. And all the virgins arose and trimmed their lamps. The foolish said to the prudent, Give us some of your oil, for our lamps are going out. The prudent or the wise answered and says, No, there will be not enough for us and you too. Go instead to the dealers and buy some for yourself. We can't have righteousness for ourselves and somebody else. I can't be righteous for Jennifer. She can't be righteous for me. We're all going to be judged individually as individual Christians. I'm not going to get to heaven on her coattails, and neither is she going to get to heaven on mine. We can't say, well, I'm a part of a Christian family. My uncle was a preacher for X number of years. So, are you a faithful Christian? That's what matters. And so, because they was not prepared, it says in verse 10, while they were going away to make purchase, the bridegroom came, and those who were ready went in to him to the wedding feast, and the door was shut. That reminds me of the story of Noah, where God told Noah to enter into the ark. Time's up. And God shut the door of the ark. And the door was shut. And once the door of the ark was shut, the period of grace is over. No matter how much they begged and pleaded and knocked and wanted in, they could not get in the ark. There's going to come a time when the period of grace is over with. And all the excuses that people make for not being ready and being prepared, it's not going to work. They're going to be crying, Lord, Lord. I was talking to one of my relatives about her getting right with God, and I said, well, what would you do if the Lord returned right now? She said, I would throw myself on His mercy. I said, it's too late. It's too late then. And there's just a hope that when He comes, then they'll cry out to God. And here it says right here, Lord, Lord, open to us. But He says to them, truly I say to you, I don't know you. I don't know you. Be on alert, for you do not know the day nor the hour. That theme over and over again. You don't know when it's going to happen. So always be ready. And you're always prepared. Verses 14 through 30, he's going to give the parable of the talents. The parable of the talents. A talent was a measure of weight, not a specific coin. And so a talent of gold was more valuable than a talent of silver in that society. The modern meaning of the word talent denotes a natural ability, and it stems from the fact that this parable is enormously applied to stewardship of one's natural gifts. That's how it's applied. But the talent there refers actually to a specific weight measurement. You find that all throughout the Old Testament as well. And if you have a Bible that's a study Bible, you might have a breakdown of what all the measurements, those words mean. In fact, a talent is about 75 pounds. About 75 pounds. The point of this is being a steward of what God gives you. Not how talented you are, whether a song leader or a preacher or a good speaker or anything like that. It's not talking about that. It's talking about being a good steward of what God gives you. Verse 14. For it is just like a man about to go on a journey who called his own slaves and entrusted his possessions to them. Now, in these parables, the master, of course, is talking about Christ. The groom, in the first part of chapter 25, that's talking about Christ. The man going on his journey called his slaves and entrusted them with his possessions. Again, that's talking about Christ. He's going away. Remember what He said in Matthew chapter 15, I'm going away to prepare a place for you, and I will come again and receive you unto myself. Verse 15, to one He gave 5 talents, to another He gave another, to each according to his own ability, and he went on his journey. He gave 5 to one, to another 2, to another 1, and each one to his own ability, how he could handle that amount of money, that measurement of money, so to speak. Each one according to his ability. Then he went on his journey. Immediately the one who had received the 5 talents went and traded with them and gained 5 more talents. Verse 17. In the same manner the one who had received the 2 talents gained 2 more. But he who received 1 talent went away, dug a hole in the ground, and hid his master's money. He didn't use what God gave him. Didn't use what God gave him. Verse 19, now after a long time, the master of those slaves came. That's talking about the return of Christ. The end of time. Settled accounts with them. Verse 20, the one who had received the 5 talents came and brought 5 more talents, saying, Master, you entrusted 5 talents to me. See, I have gained 5 more talents. Verse 21, his master said to him, well done, good and faithful slave. You were faithful over a few things, and I will put you in charge of many things. Enter into the joy of your master. You know what? We're going to see this over again concerning what is said to those who are the slaves. And in verse 21, that's what we want to hear on the day of judgment. Well done, good and faithful slave. If we hear that from our Lord, we're a success. It doesn't matter whether you pick up garbage as a garbage man, or you're the President of the United States, or a multi-billionaire. If you hear the words on the day of judgment, Well done, good and faithful slave. You have succeeded. And that's what we got to get across to people. That's what matters. Verse 22, also one who had received 2 talents came to him and said, Master, you entrusted 2 talents to me. See, I have gained 2 more talents. Verse 23, his master said to him, Well done, good and faithful slave. You are faithful over a few things, and I will put you in charge of many things. Enter into the joy of your master. Talking about going into heaven. He's going to say it a different way later on. Verse 24, and the one who had received the 1 talent came up and said, Master, I knew that you were a hard man, reaping where you did not sow, and gathering where you scattered no seed. And I was afraid, and I went away and hid your talent in the ground. See, you have what is yours. In this parable, it's not that he did bad things as far as killing people and murdering people and adultery and turning over 7-Elevens. He didn't do what the Lord told him to do. He didn't use what God gave him. That's all God asked us to do. Use what God gave us to His glory. He didn't do it. Verse 26, the master answered and said to him, You wicked, lazy slave. People who are spiritually lazy, who aren't faithful to the Lord, are described here as wicked. Oh, they're not evil. Christ said they're wicked. You wicked and lazy slave, you knew that I reap where I did not sow and gather where I scattered no seed. Then you ought to have put your money in a bank, and on my arrival I would have received my money back with interest. Therefore, take away the talent from him and give it to the one who has 10 talents. For everyone who has more shall be given to him, and he will have an abundance. But from the one who does not have, even what he has will be taken away. Throw out that worthless slave into outer darkness. In that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. All you have to do to be considered wicked in the eyes of God is to not do His will. That's it. The Bible calls that a wicked person. And everyone can do God's will on the very basic, fundamental level of doing what they can with what they have. And just because you may not be a good speaker, or because you may not have an ability here or there, you can be faithful to the Lord. Everyone can do that if they really want to. I wish I had the speaking ability of some preachers that I hear. I'd give anything to be able to speak like them. There are some people who are not good public speakers, but they're good one-on-one with people. There are some people who are good song leaders, have that ability. And there are some people who can't stand before a congregation and they get stage fright. And I understand that. I faced that when I was a teenager, wanting to become a preacher. I was scared to death to be the silent man. Waiting the table. When I first waited the table, I was sitting there shaking with the plate in my hand. Being the silent man on the table. But you do what you can with what you have. That's all God expects you to do. That's all God expects you to do. And when you won't even do that, you're described as a wicked person. Worthless slave, verse 30. Be thrown into outer darkness, in that place where there is weeping and gnashing of teeth. It's easy to go to hell. I mean, some people think to go to hell, you got to make fun of handicapped people, you got to kill babies, and you got to rob banks. No, don't do the Lord's will. You'll be lost. You don't have to be overtly wicked as we see overt wickedness to be lost. Just don't do the Lord's will.
The destruction is easy and wide.
What's that?
Because the way to
The right.
destruction is easy and wide.
The way to destruction, in Matthew chapter 7 is easy. It's wide. It's a broad way that leads to destruction. And the way to life is narrow and restrictive, and we have to be willing to follow that narrow way that leads to life. We'll just touch on the parable here, or really, it's just talking about the judgment, verses 31 through 46. But when the Son of Man comes in His glory and all His angels with Him, then He will sit on His glorious throne. Verse 32 and 33, all the nations will be gathered before Him, and He will separate them one from another, as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. That imagery of a shepherd separating the sheep from the goats. And He will put the sheep on His right hand and the goats on His left. Verse 31, of course, is an awesome thing to contemplate when Christ returns with His angels. Those are the spiritual beings. Those are those spiritual entities that are going to come with Him. 2 Thessalonians chapter 1, verses 7 through 9. With flaming fire. Those are those spiritual beings. All nations will be before Him. Verse 32 will be the only time all of the human race will be together. From Adam to the very last human that's born. At the end of time. All the human race will be gathered together. First time all the family of Adam is going to be together. But even then there's going to be a separation. A separation. And we will go into that separation and what will be said on the day of judgment next week, Lord willing.